Hello and welcome to the Grizzled Warmaster. My name is Doug, and today we're going to look at another Age of Sigmar 3.0 FAQ, and this one for the Stormcast Eternals. We're only going to do a few of these, the ones that really were impactful. For example, the Lumineth Realm Lords FAQ really wasn't very impactful. There wasn't a lot of changes. There was a lot of clarification of language to like the spell lores and things like that, but not anything really drastic. I do think that the Stormcast one is fairly substantive. There's some interesting things going on, so let's go ahead and go through those. First off, we don't need to look at the errata here or the design commentary because these had already been answered. This was here well before 3. So let's go ahead and look at, we'll start with the artifacts, the Heavenwrought Armor. The Drake Scale Armor has been changed to add 1 to saves instead of re-rolling saves. Now, the interesting thing is this was not a reroll ones, it was reroll failed saves. So this is a pretty big nerf. Same thing with the Mirror Shield. It used to be subtract 2 from hit rolls for attacks made with missile weapons to now just subtract 1. So these are really not very good. Nobody took these artifacts anyways, but the Mirror Shield especially could have been useful in this current meta because the subtract 2, people being able to +1, you were still going to be -1, so that's kind of a bummer that went away, because I could see this actually getting some play if it were still -2, because shooting is going to be a big deal. Lore of Storms, interesting. They actually separated out the Lore of Storms is only regular Stormcast Eternal wizards, not evocators. And then the Lore of Invigoration is only evocators, not other wizards, which before anybody could take it, it was just the only lore and the limited 3 spell, only 3 spells in the lore that the evocators could take. So interesting that they split those apart. Not that Stormcast casting was great to begin with, but I think that the Lore of Invigoration spell for re-rolling wounds, what's it called? No, it's add 1 to wounds. The Celestial Blades. You can pick a unit wholly within 18 of the caster, add 1 to wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by that unit. That one is going to be a pretty big one, I think. So that's kind of cool that they have that. Their own empower, if you have appropriate units to target them with. Unfortunately, the new Thunderstrike guys I don't think are viable targets. But let's look real quick just to make sure, because the Evocator's spell, I believe, was limited to only Sacrosanct. It was, let's see, Redeemer or Sacrosanct units wholly within 12. So that is essentially your Liberators and your Sequitors were the only viable targets. So now if you want to bump up the new Vindictors or anybody else in your army, you might want to give them those Celestial Blade spells and give them the +1 to wound. So that might see some play, I think. Again, I skipped the spell lore and the prayer lore, just changing the headings and clarifying those things. Interestingly enough, we're losing half of the prayers of the Storm hosts. Bolster Faith, which was the one that get rid of Battle Shock. They didn't need to take Battle Shock. Abjuration was making yourself a wizard or making yourself able to unbind spells like a wizard. Now any hero can do that as a heroic action, so it makes sense. I think they just wanted to go down to 3 available selections, not have a whole 6 selections. The other one, God King Aspect, is one that I don't think anybody took anyways. It's just people within 6 or enemies within 6 inches lose 1 from their bravery. Really, there's no way you were taking that over Translocation or Blessed Weapon or Divine Light, the ones that are remaining. Interestingly enough, those have changed a little bit. For Bless Weapon, we got rid of the ability to target your own, or I'm sorry, an enemy unit. You only target a friendly unit with this now. Let me double check myself. No, sorry. It's the Divine Light. This one is just, it's the same as it's been, except for they changed the ranges. 6 is to hit or score 2 hits. It's Divine Light that changed big. Used to be you could target an enemy unit and reroll hit rolls of 1, or target a friendly unit and enemies had to reroll 6s to hit against them, which would have been a nice one to keep because of all of the ways that a lot of war scrolls now 6s to hit cause mortal wounds. So it'd be nice to get rid of that, but they didn't. But it is one of the few ways that are remaining currently to get rerolls. A lot of armies just don't have those available. Some do, some don't. There's a couple of storm hosts you can take that still have the ability to reroll hit rolls of 1 either on the charge or after they've slain a unit or they've killed a unit. So those are still there currently. Obviously, this is all going to change when the new book comes out. But if you're playing in the meantime, and these might give you some indications of what might be coming in that new book. So, so Divine Light changed. Translocation, pretty much the same as it ever was. I believe even the ranges are the same. So I'm not sure why they felt the need to reprint that. Pick a friendly Stormcast Eternal, wholly within 9. Yeah, it's essentially the same. I think maybe they just cleared up the language to give the answer value verbiage there. So, all right, mount traits. The only difference there is they got rid of the paragraphs talking about being able to choose a additional mount traits based on War Scroll battalions. Basically, they just deleted the stuff that was that's redundant to the new rules for using enhancements, which a mount trait is. Obviously, getting rid of the Path to Glory. Interestingly enough, we will see what the new Path to Glory in a battle tome is like when we get this battle tome next month. So that'll be great. I am looking forward to it if it's anything like, and it seems to be, based on what we got in the core rules, it seems to be a little bit like playing a crusade, although more campaign-like. They've got a lot more in it that makes it campaign-like. So I'm excited about the Path to Glory. The shield, the Sigmarite Thunder Shields, I think they just did some clarification, maybe make the unmodified save rolls or 6s bounce back the mortal wound. I think that just brings it in line with everything else that does things like that. Interestingly enough, everyone who is equipped with a Sigmarite shield, which is all of your Draco Riders and your I think there's a couple of heroes in there and your Liberators, now those shields just worsen the rend characteristics of weapons that target them by 1, which is great that it's not ignore rend 1, it's worsen rend by 1. And because this isn't a +2 save, you can also throw on all out defense, you can throw on Mystic Shield, and suddenly you're ignoring 3 levels of rend. So that is pretty good, especially on those Draco Riders. I never really thought I would rate Draco Riders, and it remains to be seen what the new book does for Draco Riders, but I believe they are all at a 3+ armor save. So with this worsening of rends by 1, if you throw Mystic Shield and +1 all out defense, you can have these guys down to a 1+ save, ignoring 1 level of rend. So even rend 3 weapons, they're back to their regular 3 up, which is really good. especially on a 5 wound model. Now suddenly those guys who are, it's only, they're about 200 points for 2, but that's 10 wounds for about 200 points, a movement of 10, slightly higher bravery than a lot of the rest of the army, and suddenly they don't look as bad as they used to. So we'll see if they get some play, especially with the new dragons coming. Maybe we'll see some synergy in those if they hopefully bring down the cost of the Star Drakes or make them worth their points. They are overcosted probably by 150, at least 150 points, maybe more at this stage. But we'll see what happens with the new dragons coming out. All right. Celestar Ballista, again, this is kind of bringing it in line with everything. It's kind of a bummer because being in cover used to give them +2 to their saves instead of just +1. Now it worsens rend characteristics. So you'll still get cover, +1 to save, and so you are effectively +2 against anything that has rend. The Sequitors had an interesting change. This Sequitur Etheric Channeling, now if you pick to put your energy into your shields, you get a 5-up ward save. So there you got guys with 4-up armor, 5-up ward. Throw a Mystic Shield on them, whatever. They're pretty good. They do not have Sigmarite shields. They have Soul Shields. They lost that rerolling one's ability. Everybody did with whatever shields they had. But they get the 5-up ward save. Now, this is somewhat of a nerf because this ability only activates in the combat phase. So any other times they're not rerolling. So that is kind of a bummer. But still kind of cool if you can get them stuck into combat and make them really tanky in combat. So these didn't really change the Celestial Lightning Arcs. I think they just clarified that you can only activate it once the first time they activate in the phase. So if you were playing Anvils of the Heldenhammer, if they fought in the hero phase, they could unleash their Celestial Lightning. And if you fought again in the combat phase, they could do it again because they're 2 separate phases. So I don't know of any way for Stormcast to fight twice in a round or in a single phase. So I'm not sure why they felt the need for that clarification. But there it is. All right, and then we are replacing the War Scrolls for the Endless Spells. So let's go ahead and take a look at those real quick. They largely, these first 2 were almost never taken. They are pretty lackluster. Like all predatory endless spells, the Celestion Vortex now is relatively easy to cast at 5, sets up within 6, and flies 8. I think that is close to universal. Then when you move, if you pick one unit that any models passed across, and roll 12 dice. Now, this is somewhat restrictive. You can't just end within an inch. You have to actually fly over them. And then you roll 12 dice, and each 6 is a mortal wound. So, statistically, you're getting 2 mortal wounds. Not great. They did clarify this Tornado of Magic to subtract 1 from hit rolls does not affect Stormcast Eternal units. That play in later battle tomes came much later on, and people started getting that it doesn't affect their own units. Back in the beginning, you just suffered with it. So, and again, with them being bound, you're going to be able to get that in your opponent's face, and then maybe just follow around or keep close to a significant missile weapon using opponent. For 30 points, it's not awful, but there are better options in the standard endless spells. Dias Arcanum is as worthless as it ever was. Unless you really need a wizard to fly 12 inches, there's no reason to take this. It lets you dispel 1 extra spell and subtract 1 from hit rolls. I guess it makes your wizard a little more tanky since there's no Balewind Vortex to get on anymore. But that unbind 1 extra spell is just kind of, I can use a heroic action to do that. Again, 30 points. It's not awful, but there are way better choices for 30 points. And then finally, probably the biggest loser here, the Everblaze Comet. This used to be a really good endless spell. It's not predatory, so it's not going to activate in every hero at the end of every hero phase. It just activates the once when it's set up. So you set it up wholly within 36 inches, which is far, especially on the new tables. That's pretty much anywhere you want it to be. Then you roll a dice for every unit within 10 inches. On a 1, the unit suffers 1 mortal wound. So it's going to take something. 2 to 5, it's D3. On 6, it's D6. So that's good. But it lost the secondary, which was every round it was on the table, it would burst again. A smaller range, I think it was 6 inches. But it still could do damage, basically forcing the opponent to either endure the comet to stay where they wanted to stay, or take or flee to get away from the damage. And it does subtract 1 from casting rolls for wizards within 10 inches of this endless spell. But again, they can quickly get out of that that range. It's a big nerf. And it went up in points to 110 points. It was already very difficult to justify the 100 points unless you were going for a real shooty army and you wanted to be able to throw down those mortal wounds and disrupt your opponent's lines, and maybe snipe out some important characters, or at least chip at some important characters. The Everblaze Comet was difficult to justify its 100-point cost. Now at 110 points and only activating on the turn it comes in, it is essentially worthless. I hope it gets a rewrite in the new Battle Tome, but man, if this is any indication of what it's going to be like, this thing will just sit on a bunch of shelves. I used to love taking the Comet. It was a great way to surprise your opponent and go, check this out. I'm going to nuke the middle of your army and make you move away, put it on an important objective. Like there were several battle plans where, there was one objective in your opponent's territory, one in yours, 2 in the middle, or something along those lines. You just drop it on that objective in their territory and go, if you want to hold that objective, you're going to have to sit there and take stuff or leave it vacant. It was especially good in that all or nothing scenario where it was, if you control both objectives, you win. You throw that down and go, hey, are you going to try and hold that objective and sit there and take mortal wounds? But all right, that's enough rambling about the Everblaze Comet and how it's horrible now. But anyways, let me know what you think about the changes. How many of these do you think will port over to the new Battle Tome when we get it in a month's time or so? And I think a month is pretty accurate. They have been so quiet lately with news on either the Orc War Clans or the Stormcast Eternal new Battle Tomes or anything about those armies. They've just barely started trickling that information out this week. So I think that means that we have probably this week and next to get previews. The end of that week will be pre-orders, and then that puts us into the 3rd week, maybe the 4th week, to get all of this new stuff. And considering we're getting a bunch of new models too, that might make it that much longer. Remember when Dominion went on sale, which is the last time we had a bunch of new models go up, it was a 2-week window for pre-orders, probably because of COVID and disruptions to supply chains. So I would not be surprised if that happened again, and that it's week 3 or week 4 of August before we actually get our new Battle Tomes and some of these new models. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you would, please share with a friend. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.